This is 8 Biker 5 and 9, part 3 of reading the art book. Modern art, 1850 onward. I pressed the fire control and ahead of me rockets blazed through the sky. In the modern era, artists focus less on the subject matter of their artwork and more on the artistic process and sharing their ideas and emotions through their art. Wham! Art style. Impressionism. Art was to change forever. In 1860s France, when a group of artists invented Impressionism, their new approach was to capture the impression of what is seen at any particular moment. How the picture was painted became just as important as the subject matter. Unable to exhibit their work at the art academies, these artists organized their own exhibitions. How did it happen? By the 1840s, really mixed paints could be bought in resealable aluminum tubes. This meant painters could complete a painting outside more easily, allowing them to capture the light and weather effects on a scene. Galloping Horse, 1887, by Edward Muybridge. By 1850, photography invented just over a decade earlier and developed and became a craze. Later, motion photography captured how animals and humans moved. These developments made artists rethink the composition and accuracy of painting. Poachers in the Snow, 1867, by Gustave Courbet. In the 1850s, Gustave Courbet and other painters began painting realistic scenes of rural and working life, including its all harsh details. This was not approached of by the art academies, which preferred paintings about historical, religious, and mythical subjects. Courbet became an outspoken advocate of realism. He coined the phrase. His modern approach to painting was frank in style and unsentimental in expression. The realism movement in art quickly gained momentum in Europe. In the early 1860s, Edward Manet used a new way of painting, purposely making his brushstrokes visible on the painting. This approach makes him one of the founders of modern art. By the late 1860s, a group of French impressionists regularly met in cafes in Paris to discuss their ideas and techniques. Often, the cafes themselves became subject matter. Mother Anthonie's Tavern, 1886, by Pierre Auguste Renoir. In the late 1800s, Japanese woodblock prints, see page 54, were seen in Europe. Their boldness, simplicity, and unmodeled figures influenced the Impressionists. Artists were especially affected by the lack of perspective and shadow, as well as the flat areas of strong color. The Impressionist style originated in France but spread other countries. French Impressionism. Claude Monet, Impression Sunrise, 1873. The name Impressionism was given to the new style of painting by an art critic at the group's first exhibition after seeing the name of this painting by Monet. Edgar Degas, The Dancing Class, c. 1873 to 1876. After meeting the Impressionists, Degas chose scenes from real life to paint, such as dancers practicing, busy cafe interiors, people at work. Alfred Sisley, Snow at Lowson's, 1875. Most of Sisley's work is of landscapes painting with the light touch and with the pure colors applied unmixed onto the canvas, typical of the Impressionism style. Pierre Auguste Renoir, Ball at the Moulin de la Galette, 1876. This scene of people enjoying themselves in the open air with sunlight filtering through the trees is typical of Renoir's work as a true empiricism. Later, he experimented with his style, painting over 6,000 works in his lifetime. Birth, Morisot, The Cherry Picker, 1891. Morisot was the first woman to join the Empiricists. Her brightly colored paintings often showed women in family life. Camille Pissarro, The Farm at Olsny, 1883. Older than most members of the Imperialism group, Pissarro was influenced in teaching and guiding the other artists on painting outdoors. Outside France, Philip Wilston Steer, Beach at Etaples, 1887. The British artist Steer used the Imperialism style to capture the effects of light on his beach scenes and seascapes. Tom Roberts, A Breakaway, 1891. Roberts introduced Imperialism to Australia using the style to paint landscapes, portraits, rural life, and scenes from history. Childe Hassam, Isle of Shoals, 1906. An American imperialist, Hassam spent his summers on the coast in New Hampshire and captured the lighting effects on this landscape. Artist profile. Artist biography. Claude Monet, 1840. Born in Paris, but grew up in Le Havre, France. 1859. At age 19, studied art at the Académie Suisse in Paris. 1861 to 1863. Drafted into the army and served in Algeria, Africa. 1870 to 1871. At age 30, lived in London with his new wife, Camille, during the Franco-Prussian War. 1873. In Paris, he painted Imperialism, Sunrise, see page 59. 1883. Settled in Guitry on the Seine, 40 miles, 65 miles from Paris. 1903. Eyesight began to fail but continued painting. 1926. Died at age 86, and a year later a series of wateries was housed in the Orangerie, Paris, and open to the public. Artist influences. Jonah Jonekind taught Monet to look closely and clearly at the light effects in nature. Edward Manet, inspired by his bold brushstrokes and scenes of modern life. Claude Monet, my garden is my most beautiful masterpiece. Monet was one of the most famous of the French Imperialism artists. All his life, he claims that nature was his studio, and his series paintings show his interest in capturing the changing light. He would work on a whole series showing the same subject, but at different times of the day. He would change from one canvas to another as the sun moved across the sky, and then start again with the first canvas the next day. Painting large. In 1916, Monet built a studio to house a number of large canvases he had begun working on each of these canvases was over 14 feet, 4 meters wide, and wanted to recreate his Oriental garden as a large mural. The Wallery Pond, Pink Harmony, 1900, oil on canvas. How is the painting similar to Green Harmony? How is it different? This one was painted in the summer. The Japanese Bridge, 1918, oil on canvas. Monet's brushstrokes became broad and sweeping with strong, bright colors in his later life due to his failing eyesight. Modern art. Monet, an original water garden. In 1893, Monet bought a plot of land across the road from his garden in Giverny. Here he dug out a pond, planted trees and flowers, and built a Japanese bridge to create an Oriental water garden. Over the next 25 years, he sketched and painted over 250 images of the water lilies, of which series of 10 canvases featured the bridge and pond in different lighting conditions. One of Monet's sketches of the pond with water lilies in purple pencil. The Water Lily Pond, Green Harmony, 1899, 34 and 3/4 times 36.5 inches, 88.3 times 93.1 centimeters, oil on canvas. How did they do that? How to paint with pastels. A pastel is a stick of color made from powdered pigment mixed with a binder such as resin or gum. Pastel is applied directly to paper and there's no drying needed. How to color layer. There are many effects that can be created with pastels such as blending, cross-hatching, and scrubbing. Mary Cassatt's technique was to use color layering. 1. A pale sketch is drawn in charcoal or pencil onto the paper, keeping the lines light. 2. Using loose, quick strokes, the first layers of pastels are applied. 3. The paper is sprayed with a casein fixture. This is a milky solution that stops the pastels from smudging. 4. Another pastel is applied strokes over the top. This effect is called color layering. Mary Castell's style. Mary Castell was an American painter who spent some of her time in France. Here she met the Impressionism, and during the 1880s, she painted in this style to capture the fleeting moments and effects of light. In her pastel paintings, she would apply the pastels with loose, vigorous strokes, leaving soft, fuzzy edges to suggest immediacy and movement. She would layer color on top of color, which would make them appear as one color. Ask yourself, if you were painting a picture or of a friend, what would they be wearing and what would they be holding? Pastels timelines. Prehistoric cave paintings could be considered the first art created using dry pigments. Sticks of pastels have been used since the Renaissance. 1499, Leonardo da Vinci experimented with yellow pastels on the dress for his preparatory chalk sketch. Details shown of the portrait of Isabella of d'Este, a wealthy Italian lady. 1748, in the portrait of the French King Louis XV, Maurice Quentin de la Tour created wonderful textures for the different materials the king's wearing. 1771, in the 1770s, Jean-Simon Cardin started using pastels for portraits. He hadn't done either before, but discovered he was excellent at them. Late 1800s, Edgar Degas and used pastels to capture the movement and light effects typical of Impressionism style. C. 1880, the American Imperialism artist Mary Cassatt, quick strokes and layering of different colored pastels to create her paintings. 1902, Stanislaw Wybicki had an allergy to oil paint, so he used pastels to create his paintings of the Polish landscape and portraits. 2007, Daniel Garnett and around an award-winning artist uses pastels for his portraits and still life paintings, such as this one of a green checkerboard, balloons, and darts. Elise Cassatt holding a big dog. C. 1880, 25 times 20.5 inches, 63.5 times 52.1 centimeters, pastel on paper. Pastels can be held in different ways. Dragging the edge of a pastel creates large blocks of color. Cassatt's favorite subjects to paint were women and children. Women were shown reading, sewing, writing letters, having tea, and joining in family activities. Cassatt's paintings show what the lives of women and children were like at the end of the 19th century. Cassatt's modern art, how to paint with pastels. Artist profile, artist biography. Vincent van Gogh, 1853, born in Zundert, Netherlands. 1869, worked at the International Picture Dealers Gorpil and Co. but was forced to resign after 7 years. 1878, worked as a lay preacher among miners in Belgium. 1886, moved to Paris to live with his brother and met the Impressionism painters. 1888, settled in Arles in the south of France, hoping to start a community of artists, but he never did. 1889, decides to enter an asylum in nearby Saint Remy, where he painted the Starry Night. See page 66. 1890, at age 37, committed suicide. Artist influences: Paul Gauguin, influenced by the same subjects when lived and painted together in Arles. Jean Francis Millet, influenced by Millet's respect for the policy of labors in the fields. Vincent van Gogh, I am risking my life for my work, and half of my reason has gone. At age 27, Vincent van Gogh taught himself to draw with only a little teaching and continued to develop his skills throughout his life. He painted self-portraits to practice his technique. He bought a mirror and painted himself more than 30 times. Practice makes perfect. Self-portrait. Fall 1886. Van Gogh used dark colors in his early paintings until he met the Impressionism in Paris. Summer 1887. Van Gogh now experimented with light, vibrant colors and practiced using short brushstrokes. Winter 1888. Now confident with his own colorful style, he moved to Arles, hoping to create a school of art with his artist friends. January 1889, he began to show signs of mental illness, and after a violent quarrel with a close friend, Gauguin cut off part of his ear. Fall 1889. In Aslam, suffering from mental distress, he painted with curving, swirling lines. Imagine if you could walk into this painting. One of Van Gogh's favorite paintings was this one of his bedroom in the Yellow House at Arles. In the south of France, he painted with dramatic colors. In reality, his room with very little furniture. He added 2 chairs to represent himself and his friend Gauguin, and he painted other examples of his work hanging on the walls. This was the first 3 versions he painted. An artist named Seward Johnson recreated Van Gogh's paintings for an American museum. You can sit on everything. Van Gogh applied the thick oil paint with fat paintbrushes or by squeezing straight out of the tube. Try a portrait on your own. Position a mirror in front of you and draw your portrait, and then add bold colors. By Jason H. 10. Self-portrait in felt hat. 1887. 17 1/4 times 14 3/4 inches. 44 times 37.5 centimeters. Oil on canvas. Modern art. Van Gogh. Nighttime in art. Gallery. Nighttime creates different moods in art. In some of these paintings, there are themes of loneliness and fear, while others show much happier scenes, including dancing and celebration. The Dance, 1988. Paul Rego, Arlick on paper. This painting is inspired by Rego's childhood in Portugal. It is also said to represent the different stages of life, showing the generations from youth to old age. Starry Night, 1889. Vincent van Gogh, oil on canvas. Van Gogh painted this piece while in a mental hospital. He rarely sold any of his paintings during his lifetime. Since his death, however, Starry Night has become one of the best-known paintings in modern culture. Seeing Things. For more on Vincent van Gogh, see page 64. Modern art. Nighttime in art. Automat, 1927. Edward Hopper, oil on canvas. Many of Hopper's paintings show people alone mostly in urban settings. In this painting, a woman sits in a quiet cafe drinking coffee by herself. It is night, and judging by her coat and hat, it is also cold outside. Creole dance. Before 1927, Pedro Figueroa, oil on cardboard. The the Creole dance was traditional performed in Latin America. Figari, an artist from Uruguay, painted scenes from the local people's lives, including their nighttime dancing. Carnation, Lily Lily Rose, 1885 to 1886. John Singer, Sergei oil on canvas. Sergei was staying with friends when he decided to paint scenes of their children lighting Japanese lanterns at dusk a summer evening. Ceremony Under the Moon, 2004. Artist unknown. Oil on canvas. This is a modern painting showing a nighttime scene. The male coach in a thunderstorm. 1827. James Pollard, engraved by R.G. Reevy, color litho. Pollard was known for his scenes of horses and coaches. This is an antique engraving which uses metal plating covered with a special substance to create a grainy texture. Modern art, nighttime in art. Art style after Impressionism. Impressionism had a major impact on Western art. Artists broke away from the expectation that art should be large, formal, highly finished paintings. Instead, artists could express their personalities and give a response to the world through their art. After Impressionism, there came a period of even more innovation as artists pushed the boundaries even further. At Nouveau, new art was a popular moment that first appeared in the 1890s and was inspired by floral and stylist curvy motifs. Alphonse Mucha, a Czech artist, became famous in 1895 when he produced a poster of the popular Parisian actress Sarah Bernhardt that embraced this style of art. La Donne aux Camélias, 1896 by Alphonse Mucha. Art Nouveau, Fauvism, Expressionism, Symbolism, Neo-Impressionism, Post-Impressionism. Card Players, 1890 to 1892 by Paul Cézanne. Post-Impressionism describes the development of French art form the mid 1880s through the early 20th century. Artists such as Paul Cézanne wanted to develop but also challenge the ideas of Impressionism. Cézanne hoped to bring more of a sense of order to his work, structuring it more tightly. Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, c. 1884 to 1886 by George Seurat. Neo-Impressionism was a term used to describe the work of George Seurat and Paul Singaru in the 1880s. They experimented with using small dots to build up artwork. Because of this style, the style is also known as pointillism. Seurat's most famous painting, Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, was completed in 1886. Upa Upa Tahibat Fire Dance, c. 1891 by Paul Gauguin. Symbolism emerged in the late 1800s, largely as a reaction against realism and Impressionism. The movement saw artists exploring the realms of fantasy and using metaphors in their work to suggest their own ideas of mystery. Some, for example, used the Bible, while others used spirits or ghosts. Paul Gauguin spent parts of his life in Tahiti, where he gained inspiration from his painting Upa Upa Tahitian Fire Dance. Expressionism, The Scream, 1893 by Edward Munch. Twists and distorts reality in art with the global of provoking an emotional response in the viewer. It could often be an expression of the artist's inner turmoil and confession. Edward Munch showed this to great effect in the painting The Scream. The Symphony, 20th Century by Emile Petrot. Cubism was a revolutionary new form of painting, seen famously in the work of Pablo Picasso that emerged in 1907 and lasted into the early 1920s. Subjects of Cubism paintings are broken up and painted as if viewed from different angles. Emiliano Perotti was an Argentinian painter who experimented with Cubism and whose exhibition of Cubist work in 1924 in Argentina was considered very shocking. Constructivism grew after 1921 following dramatic challenges in the political structure within Russia. Art came to be seen as a tool that could embrace social challenge and inspire future development. It inspired artists outside Russia as well, one being Jose Torres Garcia, a Uruguayan artist. Locomotive Construction, 1930 by Joaquin Torres Garcia. Bridge on the Themes. Seen 1905 by Andre Dutern. Fauvism looked to a vivid use of color and was an art movement led by close friends Henri Matisse and André Derain, who were termed les fauves, the wild beasts. In 1905 by a critic, Fauvism brushwork was bold and the subject was simplified. Derain depicted London in a new colorful way using bright color and short broken brush marks. Futurism appeared in Italy in the early 20th century. It looked to the triumph of technology and invention over nature and toward a promising future rather than dwelling on the past. The swirling factored shapes and forms in Umberto Bosellino's work show this love of speed and technology. Realism took daily life as its subject matter and aimed to depict it as realism as possible. It began in France in the 1850s. Later on, American artist Edward Hopper became a leading example of this kind of art, making arresting images of ordinary life in America. Electricity, 1916 by Umber Barloni. Conference at Night, 1949 by Edward Hopper. Modern art after imperialism. Artist profile. Artist biography. Henri Matisse, 1869, born in northeastern France. 1887, went to Paris to study law, became ill, and turned to studying art in 1891. 1904 to 1907, became the leader of a group of art-grade artists called the Fauves Wild Beasts. 1908, published notes of a painter describing his theory about painting. 1921, moved to the south of France. 1941, became confirmed to bed of a wheelchair after 2 operations. 1954, died of a heart attack at 85. Artist influences. 3 Bathlers by Paul Cézanne, bought in 1899. Influence layout of paintings is Islamic art, influenced by the use of patterns and the decorative use of color. Drawing with scissors, cutting out paper, arranging the pieces into a picture, and passing them onto a flat surface is a technique known as collage. When Matisse was no longer able to stand or see well, he chose to use this technique with the help of assistants. He painted sheets of paper, cut out different shapes, and then arranged and passed them down. Henri Matisse: when I paint green, it doesn't mean grass. When I paint blue, it doesn't mean sky. When he was recovering from an illness at the age of 20, Matisse was given a box of paints by his mother. This moment began his career as an artist. Matisse was obsessed with color and used it to create shapes, mood, and emotion. He played and experimented with color all his life, often creating the feelings of joy and playfulness in his work. Now you try. Try creating your own picture in the style of Matisse. Like Matisse, you can be creative with colored paper, paint pieces of paper in bright colors and then cut them into shapes. Move the shapes around until you're happy with their arrangement. The Sorrows of a King. Gouache on paper, on canvas. Colors and patterns stand out in Matisse's pictures. How many colors can you find in the picture? How do the colors make you feel? Matisse chose his colors to express emotions and cleverly arranged them so that the picture is relaxing to look at. In his picture of a snail, he arranged the shapes in a spiral to suggest a shell. The Sorrows of the King, 1952, 115 to 152 inches, 292 to times 386 centimeters. Gouache on paper, on canvas. Cut out clothes. In addition to color, Matisse understood body shapes, and he could suggest an object or person by showing a simplified shape with a few flowing lines. In this picture, you can find the sorrowful king playing his guitar and a dancer and a seated figure trying to cheer him up. The snail. Gouache on paper, on canvas. Modern art. Matisse. Artist profile, artist biography. Pablo Picasso, 1881, born in Malaga, southern Spain, 1901. At age 20, visited Paris and painted pictures of desperate street figures in shades of blue, known as his blue period. 1904, settled in Paris, painted circus figures and barlequins in orange and park colors, known as his rose period. 1907, at age 26, painted Les Demoiselles d'Arvigues, which broke with the traditions of Western art. 1909 to 1914, worked with Georges Braque to find new ways of showing spaces and volume, now called Cubism. 1946 to 1973, lived in the south of France, continuing his painting and experimenting with kermesses until his death. Artist influences. Paul Cézanne, inspired by looking at the shape and form of nature. African sculpture, inspired by the boldness and expressions of these non-Western works. Pablo Picasso. When you come down to it, all you have is yourself. The Spanish artist Picasso was a gifted artist even as a child and became one of the most important modern artists. He was bold, original, and intensive, and used all kinds of art materials, including collage and ceramics. The themes he chose was often about himself and also universal love, violence, birth, and death. Model and muse. The woman in the photograph and seated in the chairs is the French photographer Dora Maar, who was Picasso's mistress and muse inspiration for 7 years. Beautiful, intelligent, and politically aware, she took step-by-step photographs of Picasso painting Guernica. This photograph shows Dora in about 1947. This portrait shows Dora from two different angles in profile and full face. Guernica. During the Spanish Civil War, the small town of Guernica in Spain was attacked by 28 bombers on April 26, 1937. Immediately afterward, Picasso painted this large picture. He wanted to show the suffering of ordinary people and animals and to bring the Civil War in Spain to everyone's attention. Guernica, 1937, oiled on canvas. Study of a weeping woman. This painting of a woman mourning was used as a study for Guernica. Below, Picasso used Dora's features. He wanted to show the woman's suffering, and to do this, he distorted her face and used colors in an expressive, not a naturalistic way. Look closer. Look at all the jagged lines in the paintings and how they convey the quality of grief. We can actually feel someone crying. Picasso has combined the folds of a handkerchief with the fingers and made the fingernails look like tears. The pupil in Dora's eyes looks almost like a military plane to symbolize the ones that attacked Guernica. Did you know that Picasso and his friend Georges Baruch developed a new art style called Cubism? The surface of the painting was fragmented, alternating shapes and showing different viewpoints at the same time. Modern art, Picasso. Weeping Woman in 1937, 33.25 times 29 inches, 84.7 times 73.9 centimeters, oil on canvas. Modern art, Picasso. Art style, native art. Native painting is the work of artists with little or no formal art training. In the 20th century, these simple art, cartoon-like paintings with their bright colors and awkward drawing became popular and even inspired the work of artists. The native artists were interested in the subject matter and often chose to paint their favorite subjects. Grandma Moses. Come on, Old Topsy, 20th century. An American farmer's wife, Anna Moses, only started painting in her 70s. All over the next 30 years, she died at age 101. She produced an amazing 3,600 paintings, mostly about her memories in a farm life. Alfred Wallace, two boats with yellow sails and lighthouse. 20th century. Wallace, a British fisherman and a scrape merchant, only became painting in his 60s. His main subjects were ships, fishing, and coastal villages. Henry Rousseau, Jungle with horse attacked by a jaguar. 1910. The French self-taught artist Rousseau is best known for painting wild animals and tropical jungle scenes, but these were fantasy. He had never seen a jungle, but just studied tropical plants in the Botanical Garden in Paris for refugees. Camille Bombus, the intense athlete. C. 1930. The French native artist Bombus is famous for painting circus scenes in his youth. He was a champion local wrestler and then joined the traveling circus such as a strongman. Wilson Bigod. Baal Maltiri, 20th century, big art. One of the native artists from Haiti featured scenes of everyday life in the country, including lively carnivals and dances in this painting and many others. He backed the scenes of golden light. Dora Holzhandler, ice cream parlor Boone, 2008. Holzhandler loved patterns and often her pictures featured stripes and checks on the chapters, clothes, and on furniture and wallpaper. Ivan Rabuzin, My World, 1962. A Croatian carpenter, Rabuzin developed an interest in painting in his 20s and painted whenever he had the time. His first exhibition of paintings when he was 35 was so successful that he later gave up his job and became a full-time painter. He continued to learn about art by visiting galleries and reading about various artists. Beryl Cook, Germany, The Lion Tamer. 1983. Cook started painting in her 40s when she borrowed a paint box from her son. This British artist is famous for painting funny pictures of fat ladies. Laura Stefan Laurie. After the wedding, 1939, the British artist Laurie was one of a number of trained painters who adopted the style of native art. His urban scenes usually featured factories and other grimy buildings against the white sky and crowds of styled spindly figures known as matchstick men. Modern art, native art. Thank you for listening. This was part 3 of me reading the art book. Please like and subscribe.